All right. So we've got our molar mass. And we wrote it out like this so that we know what we're doing. We know what we're doing. Now I want to answer this question. How many formula units are in 724.6 grams of magnesium sulfate? That's what I want to do now. And I want you to write every single unit. Hang on, before we do that, let's go back and let's play with some algebra here. We've done some algebra in the past, right? We had algebra in 6th, 7th, 8th grade, right? We did a little algebra last year maybe, and then we're doing some algebra this year for most of you, right? We're doing algebra 2. So I want to talk about units. And we're used to working with letters, right? X and Y and Z, A, B, and C, yes? We worked with letters in algebra? All right, so I want to talk about that because it's really important that you grasp why we can do these things. And so I'm going to give you an example of a formula here that looks kind of weird and complicated, but trust me, the answer is going to be super easy. So I'm going to have 4x times you should write this down. Let's see. Over let's do this. Y'all should write that down. So I'm going to have 4x times 6y over 12x times 24z squared over 2y. This would be a great time if you have a different colored pen, or of course everybody should have a red pen. Go ahead and get that out because we're going to use some different colors because I think it's going to be helpful for you to be able to see exactly why we can do this. Now when I'm doing math, if I end up with an answer that is 242 x, y, z squared over 121 x, y. If I were to end up with a problem like this, what are some things I could do to make my life easier? I could do that. I could do 242 divided by 121 is going to be what? 2. I could do that. I could get you a 2 here. What else could I do? I can get rid of the x and the y. And so the final answer to this would be what? 2z squared. Y'all okay with that? Do y'all remember this from algebra days? Yes? We okay back there? Does this make sense from algebra? Is this legal? Is this allowed? Y'all taught that's okay? Yes? No? Okay, okay. This is what we're doing. So on the test, amazingly enough, and it's not just y'all, other students had this issue as well. You actually did okay on the percent composition empirical formula, which was sort of amazing. That's usually the hard part. Where you struggled was the dimensional analysis. And a lot of that struggle comes with not keeping up with your units, not writing them in the right spot, and canceling without thinking about what they are. All right. That's why I want to be careful with this. All right. That's a true statement. This is the same as that, not the numbers, but we just squished it together and we spread it apart, right? So let's go ahead and try this. If I look here, there's some things I can simplify. What's 1, for example? Well, let's start with the simplest, the easiest. I could do that. Come on, let's even simpler, guys. What? The x. I got an x on top and an x on bottom. I can get rid of that. What's something else I can get rid of? I can get rid of the y. When I get done with that, I'm literally going to have, what's my only variable? I'm going to have z squared, right? That's going to be it. I'm not going to have to deal with any x's. I'm not going to have to deal with any y's. All right. Now let's look at our numbers. There's some numbers we can simplify. What could I do here? I could simplify that into what? I can make that a 2. What else could I do? So 4 and 2 could simplify, right? And that turns into 2. And then what can I do next? I could, but do y'all see I got a 2 up top and a 2 on the bottom? What do? Cancel each other out. So my answer turns out to be what? 24 z squared. Everybody needs to write this. Every step, all the cancels you did. I want to see everything written down, please. Give yourself some more white space to work. Paper's cheap. So just follow me for a minute. That's not going to be right because you got mole written twice. Just hang with me. Good. Is everybody happy? Does that make sense that that's the correct? Algebraically, is this okay? Y'all see how this is allowed the same way this is? Anybody have a problem with that right now before we go any further? Before we get into chemistry, do we have any issues with that? Any questions, concerns? No. Are we good over here? Everybody okay? Because some of y'all I'm talking to struggled with this, and that's what I want to make sure that we're getting this taken care of. Before we move to this next unit, it is super important that we get this taken care of. Y'all okay with this? All right. I keep having pauses, but I want to make sure that we really get this. All right. Now that we've got our algebra reestablished, because chemistry is just an extension of algebra, we're just going to use a little more letters, a few more letters, but we're going to do the same thing with them that we did in algebra. And it's totally legal. It's totally allowed. All right, how many formula units are in 724.6 grams of magnesium sulfate? What's my given? Okay, I want to go over here. This is a conversion factor. What this says is that 120.36 grams of MgSO4 is 1 mole of MgSO4. That's what this means. But this is only true if I actually write the MgSO4 and the mole and the gram and the MgSO4. I want your brain to start treating this as an X or a Y. Those two things put together, the grams of whatever it is and the moles of whatever it is. We're going to always write number unit stuff on everything. And if we do number unit stuff on everything, it's going to be a lot easier to keep up with what we're doing. So somebody asked me, well, why does it matter if I write MgSO4? Because, I'm starting with MgSO4. I'm going to end up with MgSO4. I don't even need to write it. I said, well, that was true for mole. The unit we're starting today, stoichiometry, that's not true. Stoichiometry, we're going to start talking about where I start with one thing and I end up with something totally different. And if I don't keep track of this, I can lose track of what I'm doing. It's really, really important to write these down. And I know historically we haven't done that, like in the history of your classes. We're finding area and we're not counting off for writing centimeter squared, right? Or volume and meter cubed. We need to start doing that. And I really, it's gonna be painful if we don't get this down, because this is where mistakes were made. So I want to go from grams. If I have an equality like this, that means I can write fractions. This literally says 120.36 grams of MgSO4 in 1 mole of MgSO4. From a practical standpoint, this is going to equal what? Mathematically, algebraically, if x is equal to y, then x over y equals 1. And y over x equals 1. And anything multiplied by 1 is itself, right? When we're doing dimensional analysis, I'm not changing anything. When we're doing dimensional analysis, I'm not changing the value, the actual amount. I'm just changing how I count it. Right? If I had 24 eggs, I could tell you I have 24 eggs. What's another way I could say that? I had 2 dozen. Did I change the number of eggs? No, I still have literally the same number of eggs. I just changed how I communicated that to you. This is all dimensional analysis is. I'm just changing how I communicate to you. That's all we're doing here. All right, so I've got this, and I want to go from and to. Right? If I want to go from this on top, what units have to go on the bottom here? If I have grams of magnesium sulfate here, what has to go down here? Grams of magnesium sulfate. And in this case, it is okay. Now, just like we did on the algebra problem a few minutes ago, I want you to take your different color and cancel out grams of magnesium sulfate. Yes? Okay. Yeah. Okay. And that's okay. I generally recommend crossing out as you go. But if it really works for you not to, that's okay. All right? And again, a single line, you can still see through a single line. But if that's causing the trouble for you, you don't have to do that. But right now, if I were to solve this, my units would be what? Moles of, yeah, they're together, right? Moles of MgSO4. All right. Is that what I asked you for? Ask you for what? Ask you for formula units. All right, let's erase this. Erase all that. Do I have a conversion factor that gets me from moles to formula units? What's that? Right. So I could do this. I can say that, let me use my purple here. 1 mole of MgSO4 is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd formula units of MgSO4. That's an equality, right? That's an equality. So that means I can write it as a fraction. And I want to go from what? Moles to what? Formula units. All right. So 1 mole of MgSO4, 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd formula units of MgSO4. Once again, get a different color. Let's see. I want you to mark out, what can we cancel? Moles of MgSO4. Yeah, these things go together. And you'll understand why when we hit this unit. Okay? They go together. So now if I were to solve this, my units would be what? Formula units. Is that what I asked you for in the question? Yes. All right. So the next issue I got was unreasonable answers. Answers that made no sense. What I mean is I got things that I got like 2.6 times 10 to the 49th grams. All right. So mercury is like times 10 to the 24th grams.
Can I drink something?
Yeah. Okay. That gives you a scale of thing. I think that's in the scale of Jupiter. So if you get answers like 10, something to the power of 10 to the 49th or 46th or 56th, you probably did something wrong. That's not a reasonable number to get. It's just not a reasonable number to get in chemistry. Ask yourself, did I get a reasonable number? This is particularly important for those of you who depend on the punchy. All right? And I mean the calculator for anybody who hasn't been hanging out with me for a while. All right? Many of you see numbers and that's you're just self-control. You just grab that calculator and pull it in close. It's your little security blanket. I want you to start thinking about my answer should be in the ballpark of. And that's why I do these quick estimations. It's not that that's going to be perfectly the answer. Sometimes you may not even get it right. But you can do some simple things. So for instance here, we're going to do the punchy because we want an exact answer. But I want to get a ballpark answer of what I should expect, what would be reasonable. So this is 724 and this is 120. So I could round this to maybe something like 720. 720 divided by 120 is about 6. So about 6. And 6 times 6 is 36. And 36 times 10 to the 24th, 10 to the 23rd is 10 to the 23rd. I can make that back into scientific notation by making it what? 3.6. All right, that's my ballpark answer. When I do my punchy, I should expect an answer somewhere close to that. Maybe not exactly, but somewhere close. And remember, if you're not going to use powers of 10 rule, you're actually going to punch in the exponents. Go ahead and use parentheses. Every time you've got this big old number, every time you see that, go ahead and use those parentheses. Wrap those up. Make sure you don't make mistakes. Now in this particular one, it's not a big deal. But my advice to you is every time you're doing this with these nice big numbers, just wrap them in parentheses. If you get used to it, you're much less likely to make a mistake. All right, so somebody go ahead and punchy that for me. What do we get? 3.624 times 10 to the 24th. Okay. I want to see number unit stuff at every single step. Every single step. I've already started taking points off. I'm going to start taking more points off until we get down to 0. And then I may start giving you negative points. I want to see number unit stuff. There's not that many problems of homework in this unit. Okay, we've actually created some white space for you. You need to see this, because this is where people made mistakes. It was on this stuff. It was on dimensional analysis. We did okay on the percent composition. We did okay on empirical formula. We blew it when we were doing this. converting moles and grams and things like that. I need y'all to write this. So I want to see everybody's paper here. Okay. Make sure I cancel out moles. Again, leave yourself some white space. Give yourself lots of room. You got paper's cheap. Okay. Work on that. Okay. Try to start working on it all in one equation like that. You'll end up making less because what if you take this and then you multiply it, you might end up with with rounding mistakes. All right. Again, give yourself some space. Work it out, okay? Okay. When you're canceling this, you're canceling both. What's that letter? Why is that letter there? Yeah, don't put that letter there. But you're canceling moles of MgSO4. Moles of MgSO4. So those two pieces together cancel. Okay. Okay. Right there, that's not grams per mole. That's just grams. And this is where you're canceling your units. This is grams of MgSO4. You can't cancel grams of MgSO4 with grams per mole. It's grams and grams. So get rid of the mole there, because the mole's on top. You flipped it. Right? Okay, so just be careful with that. I'm really emphasizing units. And then the mole here and the mole there, that'll cancel. These are not molecules. It's an ionic compound, so it's formula units. Just be very careful like that, okay? And so write the units as you go, and you'll keep up. So we're canceling moles and moles of MgSO4, moles of MgSO4. Okay, good. Let's see what you got. Yeah. Yeah. So does everybody get what we need to do moving forward? Okay, we're probably going to have a quiz next class. This stuff. Okay, you got to get this stuff down before we can move forward. The other place that some people are making a lot of mistakes is really this very first step. Naming and formula writing. This has got to be automatic. We've got to be able to name and formula write without, just second nature. It's got to be second nature, right? So we've got to get that down. And so if you're struggling with that, check out some YouTube this weekend. Tyler DeWitt, somebody I recommend. You can go back and watch some of the class videos if you find those to be helpful. You've got, what's his name? Professor Dave. You got some things on there. You got the organic chemist. If you want to go up there, it's a little higher level, but they all going to have some videos on how to do naming. Okay, because going forward, I'm going to start just assuming you can do names and formula write. Your problems are going to be given to you with the names, and you're going to have to first write formulas, then balance equations, then do the next step that we're going to talk about today. Are there any questions on how we do this and what I'm expecting from y'all? Yes? We're good? Everybody fine? Okay. Any questions anybody remembers from the test? What? Hydrates. We'll talk about hydrates next class, so I'll make a note of that here. Okay. Anything else?
I remember I struggled really hard on one question, but I don't remember.
Okay. we'll hopefully by next class everybody will have taken it, and we can sort of spend a few minutes talking about it. All right.